Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Ron Bowers and Andrew Barnhart. The Flip Side starts right now. Welcome to the show. Well, the state legislative session in Annapolis is over for the 2019 installment, and we have a special guest with us tonight, Andrew Barnhart. Andrew is a former candidate for a state position, and we thought it would be nice to bring him in. And Andrew, I understand you've agreed to actually stick around for the entire show, so
yeah,
you'll get to set up. You'll get to deal with all the madness.
Yeah,
that
great.
would be Ron's madness, just so you know.
Oh, that's fine.
So first of all, let's talk a little bit about running for office, because you know, to those of us who have never run, it's kind of a mystery. Tell us about the experience. Tell us about what surprised you, what didn't surprise you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on here. Well, what things that surprised me, I mean, this was my first time running for office as well, so I kind of jumped into it headlong, not knowing anything about, how to run a campaign or, all that sort of stuff. So it was a huge learning experience. Things that surprised me, the amount of support that was out there for me, that, there was a lot of people who, in my circles, was very, very happy to have me run. It was also a little bit surprising, at least for the Green Party, and for me in general, and for, us, to run in races where there were, no Democrats to be found in these particular races, which was kind of surprising for us. But I had, an amazing time just going out there and meeting new people. I loved that part of it. Learned a little bit more about public speaking, and yeah, it was a really great time. And I learned a lot in terms of policy positions and things like that. So
okay,
it was good.
Great. Rob?
Moving forward, you know what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
The question can a Green Party candidate win? But before, as you do that, let everybody know how many votes you have as we talk about, can a Green Party candidate win? Would you ever consider changing party? Or do you think, since Democrats can't get their act together in a lot of areas and can't run and don't run, whether or not it is possible for a Green Party candidate to win?
Right. Well, I think, well, to answer the question of can a Green Party win, absolutely. It's built into the democratic process. So I think, yes, obviously it's possible for a Green Party candidate to win. The question, I think, is how probable is it, right? I would say, if we looked at the electoral results for the Democrats for, county commissioner, or for the various other races in which it was very highly contested, Democrats lost, decisively in this county. Even when there was, ample amount of money for them to use to run, and they ran very good races, and they were very qualified candidates for those positions, but they still couldn't put up the win for that. Bernie Semler, as a prime example, he would probably be considered in a lot of Democratic circles as being leaning more conservative than liberal, but he lost to Strong principally because he had a D next to his name. He was backed by the police, backed by firefighters, backed by a whole host of people who many conservatives admire and value, but simply because he had the Democratic label next to his name, he lost by a fair number of percentage points. So the question, I suppose, is it's not just can a Green Party candidate win, but can anyone other than a Republican win in this county?
In Washington County.
Yeah, in Washington County.
It's been a long time since we've had a Democrat on the county commissioners. A long time.
Very long time, yeah.
And that, and I find that interesting. And what also interested me along the same lines is John Barr, former Republican, former president of MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties. Huge title, huge bump for Washington County. turned independent, and off he goes. Same with former County Commissioner Bill. He ran as an independent this time and lost.
Yep.
So, it's an interesting point, and it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. The other question that I would ask is, when you got into this, what did you think your chances were? Did you think this was an exercise in futility and you were there to carry a message, or did you think you had a real shot at it?
I think it was, first, I went into this with some optimism that I had, some possibility. There's always that possibility of winning. So I knew that there was that possibility that existed. But again, the question is, how probable is that outcome? I didn't think it was highly probable, considering that, the Green Party of Washington County started up last January. And then we fielded candidates in June, in the middle of June or July, with the race, coming in November. And for us, we fielded, again, candidates in places where Democrats didn't put up any candidates. So we felt that in doing so, our chances were significantly higher than if we fielded candidates in places where Democrats, were. So we felt that there was perhaps a possibility, a stronger possibility in that instance. But one of the big reasons why all of the Green Party candidates, including myself, wanted to get into these races was to give the people of Washington County a true democratic election, where it's not just we sweep these candidates into office without any kind of contesting of them or without challenging them on their views. And certainly I don't think that the Republican Party represents every single person in Washington County in terms of their views and in terms of their ideology, in terms of their policy ideas. So we wanted to give people of Washington County, something new, something different, something other than the two principal parties, and we wanted to give them a proper election so that they had choice. And that's part of the democratic process. If you don't have that, then...
Where does the Green Party in the spectrum of conservative and liberal, so to speak, where does it fall?
It would fall on the progressive side.
So on the Democratic side?
So, yeah, more on the Democratic side. It's leaning now more further towards the left. So for instance, our candidate for governor, Ian Schlackman, he would identify himself as a kind of eco-socialist. Same thing for other Green Party candidates like Howie Hawkins, who's also running an exploratory committee for president. He was also pushing a kind of eco-socialist agenda as well. So we've had, if you look at the platform, it's fairly progressive in that regard.
Interesting.
If two candidates that you ran against, they have an ideology that is very right-wing. I don't feel they represent me or my views. You represented my views far more, and it showed at the ballot box. How will you run in the future by running really a progressive left when you know the people in the community aren't progressive left, that they're more centrist? Our community is not even centrist anymore. It's far more right. That doesn't say it's right because they're right, because we lose a lot. I thought we were elected to represent the people, not to represent one ideology.
You're right.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that I'm not really trying to push any kind of label. Like I'm not really trying to push eco-socialism. And I think even all the candidates that ran Green this time around, we weren't really trying to push eco-socialism. We were trying to push particular issues, I think, that resonate with the people of Washington County. I think to give a kind of national example, someone like Bernie Sanders, his message actually does resonate pretty well with a lot of rural county areas. People don't like the fact that a lot of major businesses are, closing their factories and moving shop elsewhere and basically ruining the local communities. People kind of like the idea, like, hey, maybe we should, build more worker cooperatives where the enterprise is much more democratic in nature. People like the ideas like we should protect our environment instead of, trying to force temporary infrastructure for fossil fuels that ultimately damage it. I don't think that's something that people reject. I think those are things that people really want more of. And by sticking to the issues, I think people will kind of realize that they're a lot more progressive than what they think.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you obviously had to do as a candidate for a state office is really bone up, for lack of a better term, on state issues. What news sources, what sources of information did you find very helpful? What sources of information did you find that you could trust?
Right. So it depended on the issue, I think. For disability issues, which was one of my big platforms, I had a lot of help from the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. My mother is a member of that council, and they have worked on a lot of policy advocacy down in Annapolis, and I've worked with them before in testifying down in Annapolis. So their news sources about what's going on in the legislative sessions and things like that, I think are highly trustworthy. So when it came to that, they were a pretty good resource. I trusted, a fair amount of local independent news resources too. Ryan Miner I think he's been on the show before. I trust his work. I like his work in terms of trying to get out the word of what's going on down in Annapolis. Baltimore Sun, Herald Mail. Although, with all of those, local news, it's harder for them to sustain themselves, which is, I think, a tragedy. Sometimes I would look at the Maryland Reporter occasionally to see what's going on there. And sometimes, you'll find some Maryland news in the Washington Post and, various other places too, to try so I try and get my sources from a variety of places to keep me informed.
As you were out and about, going door to door and meeting people, what did you find the level of knowledge among the voters, the potential voters? Did you find that most of them knew something about what was going on in our state, or do you think there's an information gap there? Do people care?
I think people care. I think that it's hard for people to keep up with all of it. It's hard for them to keep up with just the national news, because I find that most people, when I went out and knocked on doors, there was a gap in their knowledge, mostly because there's just not enough time in the day. I mean, for a lot of folks, they're working 40, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week. Then they go home and they take care of the kids and, make dinner and all that sort of stuff and try and unwind and relax. And there's no time for them to look into what's going on down in Annapolis or what's going on in Hagerstown or Washington County, let alone, the national scene. So, yeah, there was definitely a gap there, and there were folks who didn't know about what's going on down in Annapolis or who was running at all. It's just really difficult for people to keep up.
Do you find that they were more often underinformed or ill-informed? Is there, in other words, are there people that follow some of these crazy things on social media and so forth and take that as the gospel versus, we just are not familiar with an issue? I
think there were some people I did come across that were ill-informed. It did seem like they would get their information from non-credible sources or things like that. Memes, yes. But I think most of the people I encountered, they're smart people. They know how to think. It's just a matter of them having the time to sit down and look at the issues and form their own opinions.
Interesting.
Is that generational?
Perhaps. I didn't think that. Most of the people I found were even the older generations. Even if they were uninformed, I think they were still able to, if given proper information, they could form a good opinion about particular issues. It's just a matter of having time and energy and knowing where to look for all that information.
Is there any one issue that would galvanize people other than a political party? Do people care about issues, or do they vote party?
Well, I mean, if you look at the election results, I think the election results kind of showed that people voted party, because I think in part it's easier and for them to vote party because, it's, again, they not enough time to think about all the issues and think about where the variety of candidates stand on those policy issues. So one of the advantages of a party system is to say, oh, the party has, the majority of these, positions that I identify with, and so I'll vote along the party lines.
Party dog whistle politics. So it's whatever the dog whistle is that the party talks about every day, that those issues get out. Nothing that's substantive about what's really going on. It's the dog whistle of whatever party that there is.
Or the sound bites that they're able to get a hold of, I think.
The 10-word answers.
Yeah, the 10-word answers are less.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so coming up next, we're going to continue our conversation with Andrew. We're going to get into his views on some of the things that went on at the legislative session this year. So stay with us. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. We're here again with guest Andrew Barnhart talking about the state of Maryland. We talked in the earlier segment about his run for office. Now let's talk a little bit about this most recent legislative session. I'd like to get just your take on a couple of issues, and I'm sure Ron will jump in with his comments as well. First of all, the Kirwan Commission and the report that was generated from the Kirwan Commission.
Yep.
Obviously, big jump in the education budget as a result of that this year. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, I'm happy that there is an increase in education spending. I have to, of course, even with this piece of legislation, even with the report coming out, I am a little skeptical. I want to look at things with a skeptical eye, and I wonder, where is the education spending going toward? Is it going to go toward bloating administrations in the education field, or is it going more toward enhancing teacher pay, which I think it does suggest to go toward enhancing teacher pay? Is it going to go towards enhancing the resources available for students with special needs, which I think it also says that it needs to do that? And there's a whole host of other kinds of places where I want to see how that money is going to be allocated, not just sort of increasing the budget overall for everyone. And
so you want to get behind the numbers and understand how that breaks down to capital improvements versus teacher pay versus whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and depending on how that money is allocated, I think there's probably going to be improvements necessary in terms of changing where that money is going to be allocated in places where more schools are less flunded as they are now in terms of the ratios of places like Montgomery County usually gets a lot of money for education. The rural county areas.
Of course, they put a lot into the budget.
They do, yeah. But I think there needs to be some further balancing out of that.
I'd be interested.
I was just going to say that's one interesting point that I don't think a lot of, or some Washington County citizens don't get. We are a net taker of revenue.
Yeah.
We pay in less than we get back in terms of state funds. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just the way it is based on our population and our income.
Right.
But I don't think it's something that everyone understands.
Yeah, and I want to see how that balance, that balancing act, plays out. How much of that net take is going to the Washington County Public Schools, and where is that net take going within the school system?
Makes sense.
Okay, you being an adjunct professor at Frederick Community College,
yep,
and with Kirwan being former chancellor of University of Maryland, do you think the Kirwan Commission is too much geared on a college expectation than it is on a public education K through 12? Do you think it's far more out of kilter what they want because of who headed it up than it would be if there had been someone as a county executive or former county executive would have done?
I don't think that it was too geared toward higher education. I know that there's more of an emphasis on having the K through 12 students be more on a college track than, say, giving the students more options of a kind of, say, a technical education, beyond K through 12 if they want to go to a tech school and learn a particular kind of trade or anything like that. That's kind of the general trend anyway of, I think, of education, where it's still gearing students toward the college track.
Is that right or wrong?
I think for the future, it's necessary. I don't think that college is right for everyone, of course, but I think nowadays a college degree is necessary for you to do well, because more and more places are requiring a basic, bachelor's degree in various fields. The economic sectors are becoming more specialized and technical, especially in the scientific fields and in STEM fields. And all of those, companies that are in the STEM field are going to require either a kind of college track degree, or they're going to require more of a kind of trade school or technical school kind of degree.
At what point do we put in electricians, plumbers, heavy equipment operators, masons, block, brick, stone, that build the buildings that house where people say the job? Do you ever see any of the trades as being a major job opportunity? Never.
At least not anymore.
No. But who builds the buildings? Who does what we have to do? Go down to Maryland Theater and watch what happens. Why don't we consider, as what you're saying about the trades, that we get down into, you've got skilled trades, you've got trades, and you have, the tech part of it. At what point don't we include in the jobs that are going to be available for next year the trades? Why? Do you have an idea?
As to where we should put the trade schooling, or?
Well, no, as to why those jobs aren't considered as major jobs when every contractor's looking for skilled labor.
Right.
Well, I don't know that I agree with the premise that they're not looked at as major jobs. I think that college professors and college presidents are going to say you've got to have a college degree to succeed. I think the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, because there are lots of plumbers that are making really, really, really good money.
Well, why isn't that listed as jobs of next year?
Well,
don't say it is, because it isn't.
I can't speak to that with authority. I just can't. I don't know what I don't know what basis they use for determining what the up and coming careers are, whether they
don't consider it a career.
I'll also say this: there is a heavy emphasis on, and this is just speaking to my experience within higher education, not K through 12. Yeah. And I think this is also true in K through 12 anyway. There is this immense focus on STEM.
Right.
On science, tech, engineering, math. And there's fewer and fewer and fewer resources and programs dedicated toward the humanities and the arts. And if you want to talk about the arts in terms of what's going on in downtown Hagerstown, great, we do need the plumbers and the electricians and all that to build the buildings, but I mean, what good is it if we don't have programs for the arts and the humanities to actually be housed within those buildings? And I think the humanities and the arts are vastly underestimated and undervalued in terms of what they contribute to society as a whole.
I think that's why the buildings are being built, because of the knowledge of the value of arts and entertainment. My point is, if you have all the technology and building buildings and getting buildings repaired, that job is as important as a lot of jobs that they say are important for a career. We do not look at the skilled labor as a career opportunity.
I think some don't.
I just don't see it.
Okay. Yeah. Let's move on. We used 8 of our 10 minutes just on that one. Let's talk minimum wage. I know Ron has strong opinions on minimum wage, as do I. What is your thought?
Well, I went down to Annapolis to testify in favor of the minimum wage increase.
Okay.
I testified on the budget, and my mother testified on the wage bill itself within the House. We went down there as disability advocates, and we went down there as advocates for direct care providers and direct support providers, because they don't get a living wage. They take care of very vulnerable population. They provide they cook for them, they clean for them, they bathe them, clothe them, etc. And they take care of very vulnerable people, but they only get paid 11, 12 bucks an hour. I mean, and the turnover rate is so much that they don't last, more than 3 months at a time for one person. So for us, and as coming from someone with family members with disabilities, developmental disabilities, it's important that we have those people paid not just a bare minimum wage, but a dignified living wage, and to ensure that.
Ron?
I'm going to agree with Andrew. I mean, I totally agree, and that's what I've said all along. It's just a shame that people have made such an issue out of the $15 minimum wage in 2025.
2026 for small businesses.
Yeah, for small business under 14 and under is 2026. And I know, Jim, what your philosophy is, but you're right. The help that is needed, the turnover. I look at offices in downtown Hagerstown. I won't mention the one. Every couple of weeks there's a new employee there because they don't pay their people. And when they don't pay their people, they constant turnover. And they think, boy, this is the way you do business. It is no wonder small businesses don't make it. It's because it's their philosophies. If they accept and pay their people, give them a livable wage, the sky's the limit on what they can do. And who's taking it away from them? Amazon and Walmart, the big boys. They take the money away from the little business. That's who runs little businesses out of business. It isn't the wage. You expect to let the big boys take the money from you and then not pay your people to compensate for it. It just doesn't work.
One more issue that we'll talk about. What is your feeling on the End of Life Option Act?
So my background is in bioethics, and this is the exact kind of issue that my background kind of deals with. So I look at this from both a kind of disabilities advocate perspective and a bioethics perspective. And I know that this issue is very heated on both sides. I see the arguments for both sides. I think I probably would have, if I was elected to be a delegate, I think I probably would have been in favor of it. And I mean, like, I'm sitting on the fence of this and just leaning barely toward the yes, just barely. Only because I see this principally as a moral issue and less of a legal one. And in terms of morality, I don't think that the government should be in the business of constantly regulating all of our moral issues. So that's kind of where I sort of sit on it, and there are many reasons why I'm still kind of sitting on the fence with that and why I would kind of lean slightly toward the yes there. But I know it was defeated in the Senate with a tie vote.
It was.
Yeah.
So that shows that your position, you were accurate in your feelings.
Yeah.
All right, coming up next, Fast Five. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time for Fast Five, where our three panelists talk about 5 topics in 7 short minutes. First of all, let's talk about a significant loss to our community, the passing of philanthropist, citizen, builder, entrepreneur, Dave Ryder.
And
Ron?
friend.
Yeah.
And friend. A friend to many. I've known Dave has been ill for a period of time. Even knowing that, his passing was just devastating, knowing what he does for the community. I never saw a group that he wasn't willing to help, I've seen him in the last 6 months. There was a young man that was in all kind of trouble. He got into a school, and he was having trouble how he was going to get there in time, and the driving time was so much that Dave actually said, "You be here at 8:30 at the airport, and I'll fly you and your family to the airport right next to that school." And he did. And that just tells me what a person that Dave Ryder has been to this community.
Well, and he never wanted any accolades.
No.
It was never about, look what I did. It was always about just doing what needed to be done to get the job done.
Have you heard what they're going to have a service for him? It's going to be at Ryder Jet. I think it's on the 28th. Mm-hmm. A suggested requirement of attire is shorts, a baggy shirt, flip-flops, and a hat.
Yeah, that would be
and
Dave.
That's Dave.
Yeah. Andrew?
I didn't know Dave really much at all, but I've heard many stories about him, and to his friends and family, my deepest and sincere condolences. Loss is not an easy thing to deal with.
So Black Rock Golf Course is celebrating 30 years. That's I thought that was interesting. Ron?
I was on the Board of County Commissioners that built it. I was there the day that William Donald Schaefer came up and drove off of the first tee when we had the official dedication. And the other day, I wish they would have had the Board of County Commissioners that built it there, which was 30 years ago. I do think their revenue is somewhat in trouble, but I think this Board of Commissioners will give it a shot. I think we need new eyes at the Black Rock Golf Course. And I think the immediate past gentleman that ran it has just retired. But I think, at one time we were one of the top golf course in Maryland, public course. I think we can get back there, but it's going to take a new vision, new eyes, and a different perspective. And your generation's going to say, do we want to play golf? Because your generation, I don't know if you've identified yet who you are, what you want, and what you all want to accomplish. So it's good to have a younger person here that can answer those kind of things.
So you got that going for you.
Yeah, I guess so.
What are your thoughts?
Well, congratulations to Black Rock for making it 30 years. I know that even though I'm young, I do enjoy playing a round of golf. So I like playing at Black Rock. So it's nice. I think for us young folks, I know that the popularity of the sport is going down, in part because it's really expensive, and for young folks like me, it's hard to actually get out there and play golf when you are not making a lot of money.
Not to mention the fact that it takes at least 4 hours.
That too.
If it's me, it's more like 6 hours because I'm horrible.
Did you see what Waynesboro did? They just sold the majority of their course, or leased their course to a farmer. They're going to farm it, and two of the holes they're going to put solar on. So they're.
I like that.
Yeah.
So
I really like that.
That's the Waynesboro Municipal Course.
Yeah.
That's public course, and that's what their answer is to the golf course.
I really like that idea.
So our Humane Society executive recently resigned. Ron, it seems like we've been through a number of Humane Society executives in the past several years. What's going on there?
It was kind of questionable when I read it, and there was really no explanation, and the person they want to get back to something else, but they're leaving like April the 8th, which is over. The SPCA, the Humane Society, is one of the toughest jobs that anybody can ever get into. Just what you're talking about, what's right and what's wrong with euthanization, how spay-neuter programs, etc. It's a difficult job. And the board out there has been doing a good job for a lot of years, finding an executive director to head that all up and appease everybody in a community. I don't know how you can do it, but they do a good job. The particulars on this person, I don't know that it's even relevant. What is relevant is finding somebody that can help galvanize the total community and a board to make it work.
Andrew?
pretty much similar ideas with me too. I think the Humane Society does a lot of good for animals and animal welfare. I think that they really do need to find someone who will be committed to the missions of the Humane Society. And until they do, I'm sure they'll probably go through a couple more people maybe until they find someone with the right fit. It's just really a matter of finding someone with the right kind of drive, the right kind of leadership, the right kind of desire to lead the Humane Society in toward the direction that they need to go. I don't really know the executive who resigned recently, but I'm sure it's just a matter of finding the right fit.
So the Hagerstown Police Force is worried about dirt bikes riding on the streets. Ron, why is that an issue?
I've noticed that a lot of the dirt bike riders the bikes have been stolen and they're out on joyrides. And a lot of other ones are, problems as well, riding in and around the town or out just on the outskirts of town. I'm a little more worried about skateboard operators that go down the street when there's people walking out of storefronts, walking out of buildings, and they go sailing by or running over handrails or over some type of brickwork in front of a building. So I think we have a problem that's twofold: skateboarders, and then the amount of dirt bikes that people get a hold of and then drive anywhere.
Andrew?
Well, I think in a rural community, you'll probably have a high popularity for things like dirt biking, and as the municipal area continues to expand, you're probably going to see more instances of people wanting to ride their dirt bikes in civil areas, and that's obviously, I think, is going to be problem that will continue in the future. And as you said, if this is a case of more dirt bikes just being stolen and taken on joyrides, then there needs to be something I think perhaps the police do need to be concerned about.
Well, the police have been trying to enforce the laws, but it's difficult because the dirt bikes can go places that the police cars or the police on the non-motorized bicycles can't.
Yep.
So I think that's part of the issue as well. All right. Well, Williamsport, we know, is getting the C&O Canal National Headquarters, and Hancock is getting the cannabis plant. Who won? Ron?
That's a good question.
Or maybe they both,
I was going to say,
win.
I think they both won.
I would agree with you.
I think
they both win, yeah.
Won.
They both win.
Hancock's already got 50 employees working. A former town manager is managing the company, Harvest, that's taken over. And
With
it's in a building
expansion.
that was there, and
Right.
they got expansion. They're looking to go to 100 people. Cannabis is, I think there'll be different ways that it's going to be. I forget it, a tablet or something that you'll be able to eat it, or some type of a pill.
There's if they're probably looking more at cannabidiols or CBD,
Yes.
which is more of the medical side of the use of the cannabis plant. This is also a kind of issue that I focused in bioethics as well, so this is up my alley too.
Interesting.
But yeah.
So any other thoughts on that?
I think eventually, Hancock, if this is the route that, that business in Hancock is going to go down toward, I think when, it's not an if, but when cannabis will become legal in terms of recreational, that business will boom, and there'll be more jobs created in Hancock. And in terms of the Williamsport being the head of the C&O Canal headquarters, fantastic.
Yeah, that is
I think that's wonderful, and hopefully they'll do a great job of preserving the C&O Canal and the parks around there.
And the good thing about Hancock, I mean, the day it was the apple orchard capital of Maryland, where now maybe will become known for something else in Hancock. At one time was a thriving community with an economic development commission and business people there that actually was the head of the county in some perspectives, and able to draw from over in Needmore, over into Berkeley Springs. Hancock's is a really great community.
Well, and I think this is an opportunity for it to return to some of its greatness. And, hopefully, I know there's trouble at the ice cream factory or the cheese factory that's up there. But hopefully that'll get straightened out, and hopefully some other
As
good
far
things.
as sewer capacity?
Yeah. I think there's a number of issues, but and I can't speak to all of them. But the bottom line is, Hancock's seeing some growth, and we hope
Cannabis and cheese together.
And their new mayor, Dr. Salvagno, I think is really committed.
You need to get Mayor Salvagno on the program.
We are going to get Mayor Salvagno on the program. That's a great idea. All right, last topic. GOP lawmakers propose bill to separate Chicago from Illinois. What do you do with that? Is that like splitting California into 3 states? They had a proposal on that.
I think the lawmaker who proposed the bill was not really serious in that proposal. It was really more of just something to
tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, it was tongue-in-cheek to basically say, look, Chicago is controlling Illinois in terms of its policies and its legislature, while the rest of Illinois is kind of stuck in the minority in terms of the representation.
Kind of like PG County and Baltimore City control Maryland.
Yeah, in a way, I'd say it's pretty similar with that. It would be similar if, like, someone from the GOP here would say, let Baltimore City become an independent city-state, if you will.
Yeah, but what's the people here say? The people here are saying they want Western Maryland to be its own state.
Right. They want to secede.
They want to secede from the state of Maryland. Then I'd like to see them complain when their tax bills came in.
Yeah. Or there was some idea of, like, with the secession, either they become their own state or they just join West Virginia, or something along those lines.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for Fast Five. And coming up next, we're going to talk about the Maryland Legislature passing a mandate for electric school buses. Stay tuned. So the Maryland Legislature passed a mandate that requires electric school buses. I believe anything purchased after October of this year. Is that true, Andrew? What do you know about it?
I believe that is true. Anything that is purchased after October of this year, if not next year.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Fantastic. I think not just it shouldn't just be electric school buses, but we should be striving toward making all of the public transit buses electric. We should be striving toward that goal too. And I know that folks think that something like that just simply is not feasible, but I would argue, one, it's necessary. Two, there are places all around the world that are showing great progress in terms of electric vehicles and how their powers are functioning. China, for example, is close to 20% of all their bus fleets being full electric. So I think that's a good goal to strive for. I think it's great.
What would you say to the argument that the technology is just not ready for prime time?
I think that the technology is very, very, if it's not, it's very, very close. If you look at things like what Tesla has been doing, what other private companies are doing, what battery technology is doing now, battery and electric powered cars, they have nowadays more power, more torque, more capability, more speed than the contemporary and past diesel fueled engines. I think that if it's not ready now, it will be ready very, very soon.
Ron, from a cost perspective, one of the argument is that the cost burden will be significant to this implementation. And Montgomery County in particular was looking at it and said that this could really break their budget, looking at the number of school buses that they needed to
Now
purchase.
answer your own question, and what did the legislature do?
Well, there is yes, I understand that, but you can't do that every year, and
They certainly started a precedent for school buses. I mean, they said $84 million and a bill that's going to be there. Will it be a cost? Yes. I've seen that there be some type of music played because the electric school bus is going to be so much quieter. Mm-hmm. Now you can hear the buses coming. The amount of exhaust that they emit is unbelievable. Driving behind a school bus is terrible. I'll give you a slow story. Northern Middle School years ago, people were getting sick at Northern Middle. They couldn't figure out why. Constantly, they just spent dollar after dollar figuring it out. And they finally figured it out. It was the school buses that parked in front of the school waiting to pick up the kids that idled, and the exhaust was being taken into the filtration system of Northern Middle School, causing the employees and the kids to get sick.
And that's another point that I wanted to mention too, was that you can recoup a lot of these costs through spending less money on health care, because people aren't becoming as sick, not going to the doctor, or not relying more on Medicaid and other kinds of state-funded medical programs. It's the same kind of issue and same kind of argument that's used to push for 100% renewable energy production across the entire state. You'll recoup a lot of that cost through reduction in healthcare costs alone.
But again, from a strictly technology standpoint, if the technology is not ready for prime time, and it may be very near here, but there are other examples where I think sometimes we try to push the technology envelope too far. I'm a firm believer that the best way to troubleshoot a problem is to troubleshoot a technology is to stress it. So you add more volume than what you think than what the system can handle, and then you figure out how to react to that increased volume. That's what businesses do every day, right? When they have growth spurts. So that's a good thing. But the other part of that analogy is going into the donut shop to buy donuts, and they have no flour with which to make donuts.
Sure.
So if we don't have the technology, if the technology is not at a certain level, then I think this is just a big exercise in futility and a whole lot of cost for nothing. I don't know where the technology is. I'll be the first to admit that, but that is my concern.
If you think that went through a committee and came out of a committee in Annapolis and was a bill, there's technology certainly available to do it. I know Marty Snook told me in 1978, 79, I was on the Transportation Commission, said, Ron, we need to get buses. So we went out, because the buses they had was on an old Ford chassis with a gasoline engine, and it just run them to death. Well, we went out and we bought buses. And when they came in, they was these giant buses. They were unbelievably big. But it was the beginning of then how buses changed, the amount of new buses that came in. And once you start this, the availability of what you're talking about is going to be there.
To your point, though, I think that we should not solely rely on technology to solve all of our environmental problems. I think that is a very good point to make. I think that there is a lot to be said about changing aspects of, say, social organization and other kinds of material infrastructure that we'll have to change the way we live our lives if we want to live in a kind of sustainable society.
We have to change our habits.
Yeah, not just our individual habits, but our collective social habits and collective social
and we've
ways.
We've got to get by the point of, I mean, how many 20 years ago you didn't buy plastic bottles of water. Now we buy cases of them for $3, and all of that goes into recycling, which in many cases it costs more to recycle than it does to, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, there's a lot of changes we need to make. And I'm going to give you the last word on that. Coming up next, it's thumbs up, thumbs down. Stay with us. Welcome to Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down, where our panelists get to talk to us about what's on their mind. Ron, what are your thumbs up and thumbs down for the week?
My thumbs up is going to be a reoccurring thumbs up that I give, and that's on Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, Callis Contractors, Maryland Theater with general contractor Morgan Keller, and the speed at which they're both working to get those two buildings up, October the 11th for the Maryland Theater, and sometime in the spring of 2020 for the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts. And I think what they're doing and allowing kids to be there, going to school in the daytime at both places, not missing a show, and having an exit out through the construction, to meet the fire marshal's request is unbelievable. My thumbs down goes to the recent tax break in the federal government. My taxes went up this year. So it didn't wind up, it didn't help me, and as we look at it, and I think adding on to that is when the church of, the Notre Dame Cathedral burned, suddenly there was the ability to come up with multi-millions of dollars. But in this country, when a black church burned, there was no help whatsoever. And I would hope that wakes a lot of people up.
All right. Andrew?
I would say the thumbs up goes to the Washington County Goes Purple folks. I know they recently held an open sort of session to talk about Narcan training and do some Narcan training, and to continue to help spread awareness of the opioid epidemic. So thumbs up to Emily Keller and her team for organizing all of that. Thumbs down is similar to what Ron was saying about the Notre Dame church and cathedral. I remember the first time I went to Paris, I saw Notre Dame. It was the first thing I saw when I appeared out of the metro in France. And that was during the time of the Charlie Hebdo attacks with the banners flying of Paris est Charlie, nous sommes Charlie, et je suis Charlie. So I that's my big thumbs down. I really enjoyed that place.
My thumbs up is also to Barbara Ingram, but for their recent production, it was...
Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia, it was. So once again, an amazing performance by the Barbara Ingram School children and educators there. My thumbs down, and I don't know if this is really a thumbs down, but it's just an interesting point. After the publication of the Mueller report, CNN and MSNBC lost about 25 to 32% of their viewing audience. And they lost it theoretically because they just completely got it wrong. They anticipated what was going to be in the Mueller report. They got it wrong.
You have an inside track of what's in it.
Wasn't it supposed to be released tomorrow on Thursday?
Okay,
Of redacted reports being released? So
Yes,
how can
it
you
is.
say that when you don't know what's in the report?
We heard the summary, Ron.
We did?
We did.
We heard the Attorney General's summary.
We heard the summary, yes.
The Attorney General's
That
four-page
is
summary
correct.
of 300 pages.
That's correct.
That's a summary?
Yes, it is. Well, whether it's a summary or not, the fact of the matter is the American public thinks that they got it wrong, and they have shown their displeasure by turning off their television sets.
All
That is
problems are now solved.
No, I'm not saying they are. Can you let me finish my thumbs down? My point is, and my thumbs down is to anyone, whether it's the President of the United States, whether it's Congress, whether it's media on the left, on the right, in the middle, or some buffoon that is posting what is clearly garbage on Facebook or Twitter, is that actions have consequences. And you need to weigh those consequences before you start trying to set something on fire that really shouldn't be on fire. That is my thumbs down. How about that one?
Sounds like a topic for another day, too.
It is, and I'll win that one too. That's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you'll follow us on Twitter. We hope you will send us your feedback and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. Most importantly, we hope you will join us again next week for another visit to the Flip Side. Good night.